to learn of the death of His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. And I would ask if we could maintain a minute's silence, please. If you'd put your microphones on mute. Thank you, everybody. Right. For those of you who don't know, my name's Councillor June Molyneux. I'm chair of the committee. Councillor Chris France is vice chair, and also present are officers and councillors who will be asked to introduce themselves in a moment.
Sure. I'll just leave it on and play cards then.
Could I ask you to mute your microphones, please, if you're not speaking? Please note it's a hybrid meeting. We have some members joining from the Lancastrian and some members joining from home. We've also registered speakers joining virtually. A recording of the meeting will be available online following the meeting. I didn't say to ICT to start the recording, but they already have done. If you've joined the call because you're a member of the public who has registered to speak, please note you'll have a time limit of up to 3 minutes. If you're calling on a phone, you need to press *6 to unmute your device when invited to speak. The legal officer will operate a stopwatch and confirm when your time runs out. You should then finish, or if in the middle of making a point, wind up within a few seconds. Otherwise, your microphone will be muted. For ease, a pack has been prepared which contains the report, plans, presentation slides and any addendum for each item to ensure everyone can follow easily. This is available online. After officers have presented the report and any speakers have made representations, I will invite members to make comments. When speaking, please reference the paragraph number to enable everyone to follow you. I'll repeat the motion before the vote is taken to ensure everyone is aware of what is being voted on and call upon each member alphabetically to vote. If technology fails, then I'll adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the issue. And if this is not possible, a new date and time will be organised. Please can I ask members to confirm they can hear and speak before the meeting begins. I'll go through the list. Councillor Beaver?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Boardman?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Dalton?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Gordon France?
Yeah.
Councillor G?
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening. Councillor Gray?
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Hargreaves?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Hilton?
Present, Chair.
Councillor Morwood?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Walmsley?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Whittam?
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Chris France?
Here, Chair.
And myself. I'm here. Also, our officers, Adele Hayes.
Here, Chair.
Taz Safdar, our legal services team leader.
Present, Chair.
Zoe Whiteside.
Here, Chair, thank you.
Catherine Howarth.
Here, Chair.
And Nina Neisser from Democratic Services.
Here, Chair.
And can I ask, if you're not speaking, if you could mute your microphone and put your video feed off, please. Apologies have been received from Councillor Whitaker and Councillor Walmsley is substituting. Item 1, minutes of the meeting of the Tuesday the 23rd, pages 3 to 6 in your pack. Somebody move those minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I think they were minuted, seconded, thirded and fourth there. Are we all in favour? I presume we are. Nobody's saying anything otherwise. Okay. The minutes are approved. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of members on the agenda. As it's a hybrid meeting, if a member has a pecuniary interest, they're asked to leave the call completely rather than just mute their microphone for the item and leave the room if attending in person. The member can rejoin the call following the completion of the item in question. So to the business. Item 3, planning applications to be determined. We have 6 items. For the benefit of the public here tonight, the speaking arrangements for planning are as follows. Officers will summarise the report. Registered speakers will be invited to speak in the following order: objector, supporter, parish or town councillor, ward councillor, applicant or agent. All registered speakers will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes, apart from a ward councillor who may speak for up to 5 minutes. In the event that all speakers are against an application, as chair, I may grant the applicant or representative a time extension. I would respectfully ask members of the public who have not registered to speak to remain quiet throughout the proceedings and ask that mobile phones are switched to silent. So moving on to item 3A. Land at Tinklers Lane, Eccleston, pages 7 to 52 in your pack with an update on your addendum. But the recommendation remains the same, that the application be refused. Adele is going to present this item and I have 3 speakers: the objector, Martin Fisher, Parish Councillor Alan Whitaker and the agent, Rachel Leather. Martin, Alan, Rachel, can you all speak and hear the proceedings?
Yes, Chair.
Can Alan Whitaker?
Yes, Chair.
Martin Fisher?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, Adele, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
In order to use committee time effectively and efficiently, I'm going to give an overview of the planning policy position in respect of all applications, if I may, Chair.
Yes.
There are 6 planning applications on the agenda this evening, each of which seeks outline planning permission for residential development on land that is safeguarded for Chorley's future development needs under the provisions of policy BNE 3, which is the areas of land safeguarded for future development needs in the Chorley Local Plan 2012 to 2026. All applications specify the access point apart from the application of Parr Lane in Eccleston, which is made in outline with all matters reserved for subsequent approval. A separate report on each application has been prepared and is included in your agenda packs. Members will note that 2 of the applications submitted by Redrow are now the subject of appeals against non-determination, and therefore it is not possible for the local planning authority to determine them at this time. Rather, members are invited to confirm what their decision would have been so that this can form the basis of the council's evidence at public inquiry. The key issues for consideration with all of the applications is, firstly, whether relevant development plan policies are up to date, having regard to current 5-year housing land supply and relevant national planning policy, and secondly, whether this or any other factor would justify the development of safeguarded land at this time. Members will be aware that the planning system in England is plan-led and that section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act of 2004 requires that planning applications must be determined in accordance with the provisions of the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. As members are aware, the development plan for Chorley comprises the Central Lancashire Core Strategy, which was adopted in 2012, and the Chorley Local Plan 2012 to 2026, which was adopted in 2015. Core Strategy Policy 4 sets out the housing targets for the Central Lancashire authorities. The Chorley Local Plan covers the period of 2012 to 26, and the local plan identifies the scale of development proposed in each settlement, in addition to allocating sites to meet the development needs of the borough. It also provides a set of local development management policies to determine planning applications. The Central Lancashire Core Strategy sets out where growth will be located within Chorley Borough, in addition to the affordable housing requirements. There is a target of 30% affordable housing provision in the urban parts of the borough and 35% affordable housing in the rural areas on sites in or adjoining villages. The local plan sets out that Chorley Town, Buckshaw Village and the urban local service centre settlements of Adlington, Clayton Brook, Clayton Green, Claytonley Woods, Coppell, Exton and Whitley Woods are considered the urban parts of the borough where the target is 30%. Most of the rural parts of Chorley are covered by the Green Belt, and in order for the Green Belt boundaries to be long-lasting, policy BNE 3 safeguards land for future development between settlements and the Green Belt. Safeguarded land comprises areas and sites that may be required to serve development needs beyond the plan period. All of the areas of safeguarded land in the Chorley local plan were designated as Green Belt in the 1993 Lancashire Structure Plan, but removed from the Green Belt designation and reallocated as safeguarded land in the 1997 Chorley Borough local plan. Turning now to the acceptability of the development of safeguarded land at this time. Members will be aware that policy BNE 3 of the local plan designates the application sites alongside other land as safeguarded land. This safeguarding is for the express purposes of ensuring that Green Belt boundaries are long-lasting and for meeting longer-term development needs, stretching well beyond the plan period. Policy BNE 3 was adopted to give effect to that part of the framework that advises when defining boundaries, local planning authorities should make clear that safeguarded land is not allocated for development at the present time, and that planning permission for the permanent development of safeguarded land should only be granted following a local plan review which proposes the development. The application proposals involve the development of much of the borough's safeguarded land, affecting 5 out of 11 safeguarded sites. It is considered that they are plainly contrary to policy BNE 3 of the local plan. The proposals would, if approved now, bring forward the prospect that Greenbelt boundaries will need to be redrawn or increase pressures to release Greenbelt land for development. It is therefore imperative that these are decisions that should be taken in the context of a local plan review. Policy BNE 3 is self-evidently not a housing supply policy and susceptible to being out of date by virtue of the absence of a 5-year housing land supply in any event. It is moreover clearly a restrictive policy, and the grant of planning permission now would be harmful to the long-term definition of Greenbelt boundary and increase pressure for the development of Greenbelt land. The primary other material consideration at play in the assessment of all applications is the National Planning Policy Framework, which sets out the need to boost significantly the supply of housing and identifies tools in use for doing so. Members will be well aware that Chorley has an excellent track record of housing delivery and has taken strides to ensure that the supply of housing has been boosted within the borough in recent years. Consequently, to my mind, there is no conflict with the framework in respect of the overarching aspirations of boosting housing development throughout the plan period. It is noted that there is contention regarding whether Chorley does or does not have a 5-year housing land supply. Officers disagree, and the approach we have adopted in the assessment of these applications was confirmed to be correct in a planning inquiry decision in Preston on the 9th of March this year, and to this end the Council agrees with the Inspector's reasoning. This recognises the first Memorandum of Understanding of the Central Lancashire Authorities, which allows the Council to rely on the figures in Policy 4 of the core strategy. For Chorley, this provides a figure of 417 homes per annum. Since the base date of the local plan, Chorley has contributed vastly more than the anticipated quantum of development. It is therefore only right and logical that this high performance is recognised. Whilst this may change or be influenced by future appeal decisions, the pertinent point at this time, however, i.e. at the point of decision for these current applications, is that the Council is able to demonstrate in excess of 5 years housing land supply, and the framework does not therefore operate to trigger the tilted balance. Indeed, none of the proposed developments benefit from the first limb or expression of the presumption in favour of sustainable development in respect of decision making, and I reference there paragraph 11 of the framework, because they quite simply do not accord with the development plan. Nor do they benefit from the tilted balance in the second limb of the presumption, because the Council is able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The tilted balance also does not apply because the grant of planning permission would be contrary to the framework, since the sites are to be safeguarded pursuant to local plan policy BNE 3, which is a restrictive policy. It remains therefore for members to consider the planning merits of each of the proposals in accordance with section 38.6 on the basis of a flat or unweighted balance. The starting point is then a clear and harmful breach of national and development plan policy, safeguarding the sites from development for the plan period. Very significant weight should attach to those policies and their breach, bearing in mind that they are restrictive. The proposals would result in irreversible loss of safeguarded greenfield sites not required to meet current housing need at this time. This loss weighs heavily against the proposals and is contrary to the prudent use of land and resources in areas where much of the borough is designated greenbelt. The framework is clear that safeguarded land is not for development at the present time, i.e. within the plan period, and planning permission should only be granted following a local plan review. The conflict with the adopted local plan weighs heavily against the proposal in the planning balance. Members will be mindful that this harm must also be weighed against any identified benefits, and officers do accept that in turn benefits, most notably the provision of markets and affordable housing and the creation of public open space, plus the economic benefits of generating investment through construction, local taxation and resident expenditure would flow from the granting of planning permissions. Taking these in turn, the provision of housing is of some benefit. However, Chorley has an adequate supply of housing land and as such does not require additional sites to be developed. It is acknowledged that the provision of affordable housing weighs in favour of the proposals. Undoubtedly, the developments would provide construction jobs during the construction phases, though these would be temporary and as such afforded only moderate weight. The provision of open space and green infrastructure is a policy requirement but will be accessible to all and result in biodiversity gains. This carries some weight. However, it is considered that these and other benefits do not, on the planning balance when combined, provide adequate justification for the development of these safeguarded sites at this time. In addition, other harm has been identified, most notably that the proposals are piecemeal in nature and do not connect with the wider site designations. Had these sites been coming forward as part of the local plan review, then they would need to be properly planned with a master plan across the whole allocation relating to the immediate surroundings and the necessary infrastructure. It is therefore recommended that the applications that can be determined are refused and that members indicate that they are minded to refuse those that are not subject, those that are subject to an appeal. Taking the first application that's on the agenda tonight, I would draw members' attention to the additional information detailed on the addendum, particularly the request from the agent that determination of the application is deferred to allow the agent time to address the points raised in the committee report. The comments from the agent are detailed in full together with the officer response. On the basis that the agent has now made a policy compliant affordable housing offer, reason for refusal number 2 is withdrawn, and members will note that the comments from the Environment Agency are also detailed in the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
You're muted.
I'm muted. Martin, would you like to make your representations now, please?
Thank you,
Taz,
Chair.
can you start the timer? Thanks. Okay.
I've spoken to many people in the village about this application. Almost all of them oppose it. Residents are concerned about the additional burden that this development will place on an already overstretched infrastructure, particularly things like drains and sewerage. They're also concerned about school places, getting appointments with the general practitioners. There's a lot of concern about additional traffic on Tinklers Lane, a narrow country road without pavement in parts. And there is a feeling that there's a great increased danger to pedestrians, cyclists and motorists alike. There is also a lot of concern about the increase of traffic at the junctions with the green. Certainly the main route along Doctors Lane, which already is crowded in the morning with the primary school, is a worry, and exiting onto the green, particularly turning right. I contend that there is no particular evidence of a real need or an unsatisfied demand from within the village, and thus no reason for using safeguarded land now. There's little enough building land in Eccleston. If this site is used now, there'll be great pressure on the council to designate greenbelt land for future housing development. I urge the committee to refuse this application, Chair. Thank you.
keep forgetting. Alan, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. I speak as a member of Eccleston Parish Council in relation to 3 applications on the agenda tonight. I'm not going to repeat them all in each particular term because every one of the considerations those are A, B and D. Very briefly, the Parish Council have considered these applications very carefully and resolved to object to all 3. Briefly, the grounds and some of the ones that have been touched on by Mr. Fisher there, they are all on safeguarded land reserved for future need. None of the applicants have demonstrated a need for houses at this time. In total, the number of dwellings represent a 7% increase in the number of properties in the village. The current infrastructure will be unable to sustain these numbers. As Mr. Fisher talked about, school places, medical facilities, highways. This particular one, the first one, is immediately adjacent to a busy road with severe bends. The drainage, air quality that's been discussed at Planning Committee on many occasions recently are in the area of the school. And the Parish Council are very keen that the cumulative impact of all 3 applications should be taken into account by the committee, not just in isolation. There are 3 in Eccleston. 2 are named as Tinklers Lane, one's on Parr Lane. I mean, none of the points made by the applicants, I really wrote speculators then, are valid. For example, and I only chose one for the Parr Lane one, it talks about the availability of bus stops which are within 800 metres of the access, half a mile away, right? Now, that might be suitable for somebody, but it's not suitable for kids going to school and so on. And as the planning officer said, if these are approved, the green belt will be under threat. Irreversible loss of green belt land, which we can ill afford in Chorley, and certainly in a village like Eccleston, where the green belt is getting ever more under pressure. So the Parish Council object to them, Chairman. I hope they'll the cumulative impact of all 3 of these applications should be taken into account by the committee, not just in isolation, and you'll be able to determine that when you're going through the agenda, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware of the representations we made to the Planning Department on Friday last week, following the publication of the committee report late on Wednesday. We are extremely concerned with the way this application has been dealt with and the process and timing involved in bringing this application to members for a decision. Despite our best efforts, there has been little communication from officers since submission, and some of the reasons for refusal could have been dealt with in advance had officers sought to share some key consultation responses with us. Most concerning, however, are the conclusions reached on the Council's 5-year housing land supply position, which is fundamental to this application. In determining how the 5-year housing land supply should be calculated, reliance appears to be placed solely on the Cardwell Farm appeal decision in Preston last month, a decision which we understand Preston City Council are set to challenge at a public inquiry which begins tomorrow, making the timing of tonight's committee meeting very troubling. Figures quoted in the committee report are not explained, nor are they backed up by any published evidence, meaning there has been no opportunity for us to review how these figures have been reached, even though this was queried by PWA Planning. The addendum still does not clarify how the council have arrived at this figure. We have assumed that officers may have arrived at the favourable housing land supply position by taking into account previous completion rates, although this is not made clear in the committee report. If this is the case, we have provided officers with a recent appeal decision which shows this approach to be flawed. We therefore believe that there is a possibility that members are being misled in relying on the figures quoted within the committee report. The obvious outcome should see the scheme approved. However, given the limited time to address these complex issues, the lack of clarity in the committee report as to how the 5-year housing land supply figure has been arrived at, and the imminent challenge to the Cardwell Farm decision by Preston City Council, We do not consider it appropriate to ask members to make a decision on this application tonight, and we request that it be deferred to enable these matters to be properly assessed by all parties. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now invite members for their comments and ask any questions. If you would like to do so, please raise your hand virtually on Teams. I've got Councillor Morwood has indicated he wishes to speak, and Councillor Walmsley.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you'll indulge me and the committee will indulge me to spend a few minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, maybe a little bit longer than normal, with my thoughts overall as well as this particular application. To misquote Councillor Whittaker, if planning were a science and could be based on such things as algorithms, we wouldn't need the committee. But luckily, we recognise that human assessment is much better in these matters and is the best way of dealing with these applications. We base our decisions on national policy, and that requires that the planning system should be plan-led. And that makes clear that when we allocate land as safeguarded, and all of these applications, the safeguarding is the main priority we have here, it means that it should not come forward for development until the next local plan comes along. It's the basis of good planning, and a local plan ensures that we don't have the piecemeal approach that's been identified in at least 4 of these applications. I will say speculative safeguarding applications such as these don't allow us to manage. A plan-led approach provides certainty as to where development will take place and what infrastructure is required to make it sustainable. That's what we would be looking at in detail. If it was plan-led, we'd be looking at highways issues and school places and flood risk, etc., which some of the objectors have alluded to. Developers have made much of housing supply and delivery numbers, so let's look at the numbers. As an authority, we've been working with our neighbours in South Ribble and Preston to share house building across Central Lancs, and a plan that's not based on algorithms or anything else, but on local circumstances. And that plan has been recognised by the decision at Preston for Cardwell Farm, and it's given weight to our memorandum of understanding. And we have continued to deliver more than our fair share of housing, and that's been recognised in further MOUs. So it's the view of the officers, and I have complete confidence in our officers, we're not being misled, but the view of the officers that these reports, taken into account the relevance of these MOUs, the levels of net housing need, given our excellent delivery performance and the equivalent of well over 5 years supply of deliverable housing sites, that none of these sites, including this first one, are required now. This committee, this administration, in fact, is pro-development, but only where it's appropriate and to the benefit of our local community and the environment. We have a track record of making things happen to the benefit of the people of Chorley. These applications are not for the benefit of the community, but for the benefit of developers. I'll let others make specific contributions to each of the applications, but for me, I have no hesitation at all in proposing to support the recommendation for refusal of this application, and indeed I will be minded to refuse all the applications for the reasons laid down in the reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walmsley.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Morwood has done a very good job there of actually summing up the main points, really. I just want to go over 1 or 2 points that the applicant's agent was saying. She was talking about that the council didn't give much time to be able to assess the report when it came out, and also maybe not giving all the information that was relevant for the consultees to the applicant. This is obviously strongly disputed by the council officers, who I've no arguments with agreeing with. I think they've done their job, and it's just that's how the application has come about. So I'm happy that the council officers have done the role properly there. Councillor Maud has gone on about safeguarded land and explained that. Obviously, Adele mentioned that as well. A safeguarded land, it's there to stop unwanted development and obviously protect from overdevelopment. There is no indication that safeguarded land might be built on in the future. That's not what safeguarded means. It's there to protect at that time, so it may never be brought forward. So any presumption that that is the case is false. As Councillor Morwood said, you know, Chorley has actually over-delivered in its housing numbers, and the MOU with South Ribble and Preston appreciates that and builds on that. So the fact that that has been upheld in a very recent decision, which is where the applicant's agent again saying this may be wrong, but actually the most recent decision that that has been put to the test actually stands up and backs up the MOU. So why wouldn't we use it? So I would second Councillor Morwood in backing the officer's recommendation on this case, and obviously I'll reserve judgment on the others. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. To save us a little time, I'm also going to speak generally in relation to all the applications we have on the agenda this evening. Firstly, I would like to thank our own planning team for the huge amount of time and effort put in to writing up the detailed, accurate and concise reports we have in front of us tonight. As members of this planning committee, as councillors and residents of individual wards, we have a duty of care to support our professional officers' recommendations, but more so to represent the residents of our ward in all matters that may be detrimental to their lives, their amenity, their safety, their livelihoods and their welfare. There is no doubt in this council has seen an over-delivery of housing stock above its 417 minimum target year on year over the past 10 years. It's something I'm personally not happy with. However, I appreciate the council does not have any control on which developments come forward and at what time and within the planned period. I'm not also naive to expect the same volume of over-delivery for the remaining 5 years of the local plan. Therefore, following the Cardwell Farm decision on the 9th of March, the council now uses the core strategy policy 4 to determine the 5-year housing supply, a decision I wholeheartedly support. Therefore, this council has an 11.2-year deliverable housing supply over the next 5-year period, based on an annual housing requirement of 144 dwellings, which includes a 5% buffer and which takes into account previous oversupply. What we have in front of us tonight are a group of planning applications with a cumulative total of 527 dwellings, with 129 of those in Eccleston, the ward in which I represent. All applications this evening will result in over 3.5 years worth of housing delivery for the entire borough in our rural areas. Each of these applications seeks permission to build on open green spaces, safeguarded land which is supposed to be safeguarded for the length of the current local plan up to 2025. This is not to say that this land will never come forward for development, but it is true to say that we as planning committee can control when these land parcels do come forward. I'm not totally against all residential development in rural areas. Small-scale single and small site multiple developments that are sustainable and can be absorbed by the local area with little or no detrimental effect to community are what I would support. Larger developments should be curtailed to the areas around our towns and larger urban hubs, as Adele mentioned earlier, where the infrastructure is in place and where this council is investing heavily to put additional infrastructure in to support the existing and future developments and the lives of those who choose to live within them. I believe the applications in front of us tonight, as Councillor Whitaker said, have a cumulative effect on housing numbers in our rural areas that is grossly disproportionate to the actual need required within these village centres. I have specific comments for each individual application, but the majority will be based on the securing safeguarded land for future development. Onto the Tinklers Lane sites, both of them I think have got some specific issues. Our planning officers have made some very, very detailed comments within the documentation tonight. I'm not going to repeat any of them, but I think all are valid. These are all technical reasons why this application should be refused. A recommendation I fully support, and I encourage all members to do so. My recommendation is for refusal, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Walmsley, is that a historic hand? Or do you
Yes,
wish
it
to
is, Chair.
speak again? Oh, right.
Sorry.
Does anybody
I was
else
trying to move.
comment? If not, I'll move to the vote because I've had a proposer and a seconder for the opposite recommendation for refusal. And I'm going to go through the list to each member for their vote. Councillor Beaver, for or against the opposite recommendation?
For, Chair.
Councillor Boardman?
For, Chair.
Councillor Dalton?
For, Chair.
Councillor Gordon France?
For, Chair.
Councillor G?
For, Chair.
Councillor Gray?
For.
Councillor Hargreaves?
For, Chair.
Councillor Hill?
For.
Councillor Morwood?
For.
Councillor Walmsley?
For.
Councillor Whittam?
For.
Councillor Chris France?
For.
And myself for. So the members have agreed to support the opposite recommendation. Taz, do you want to confirm it?
Yes, please, Chair. So the outline has been refused for the construction of 15 dwellings with all matters reserved safe for access from Tinklers Lane at land at Tinklers Lane at Eccleston. And that was a unanimous decision, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Moving on to item 3B, land south of Pearl Lane, Eccleston, pages 53 to 100, with an update on your addendum, even though the recommendation for refusal remains the same. Adele's going to present this item, and registered speakers are Martin Fisher, and the other one is Parish Councillor Alan Whittaker, who said his comments were the same as the previous application, so he won't. So, Martin, can you hear?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Alan, you are happy with that? Sorry about this. We seem to be having a lot of emergency vehicles passing the town hall.
Yes, Chair, can I just say, it's Alan Whittaker here.
Yes,
I won't repeat the comments that I made before, just to say, to save time, it's a long agenda, but the points I'm making are very relevant to each of them, and I hope the cumulative effect will be considered.
Thanks for that. Adele, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, really, in addition to what I said at the start of the meeting, I would just simply draw your attention to the information detailed on the addendum again, particularly the comments of the agent in terms of the criticism of the report and the assessment, and make you aware of the officer comments that are included in that. Again, the agent has now made a policy compliant affordable housing offer, so reason for refusal number 2 is withdrawn. And I would also draw your attention to the comments from the Environment Agency and the Local Highway Authority that are set out on the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Martin, you want to speak now?
Chair. Thank you. A similar application for this site has been refused before, and I see nothing in this application that merits its approval. I believe that this, and indeed the other applications before the committee tonight, are purely speculative, driven by the ridiculous housing building quotas that the government's placed on Chorley, increasing massively the amount it says Chorley to build without recognising Chorley's previous achievements in this matter. I think that the fact that they're saying Chorley should build more than Preston and Stoke both put together is disgraceful, and Chorley seems to be the only council in Lancashire to have its building requirement increased. I believe that the council is doing exactly the right thing with its Central Lancashire Memorandum of Understanding with the other local authorities nearby. We should be working together, not in silos, to ensure that the needs of all our people are properly met. This application is premature. It seeks to use now, without good reason, land that may be needed in the future. And I do endorse the sentiments that have already been expressed, because once used, land can't be used again. It's gone. And if there's one thing that's true about our area, building land is in very short supply. If this were to be approved, it would make it even harder for the council to meet inflated government demands that are trying to be imposed upon it. Turning to infrastructure, the main exit from the proposed development is likely to be onto narrow residential streets that were never designed for greater traffic flow. Parr Lane itself is a narrow road, parts without pavement, and in other places narrow with lots of street parking because the houses there have no off-road space, which creates great bottlenecks that would be worsened if these houses were built. This development would also create serious traffic problems in the lane itself and at the junctions with the Green, particularly at the Lawrence Lane junction, which is where a lot of the traffic from the Tinklers Lane developments would also feed into. Trying to turn right onto the Green from that junction is already difficult. To have a lot more traffic down there would risk serious danger. There are also potentially serious effects on the other infrastructure. I urge the committee to refuse this application.
Perfect timing, Martin. Thank you. Now, over to you, members. Any comments, questions? Raise your hand virtually if you wish to speak. Oh, somebody. Who's that? Councillor Marwood.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought I'd come in
And Councillor Boardman.
to emphasise what the objector said about what he considered unfair numbers between Chorley and other local authorities. I'd just highlight that you know, that how ridiculous some of these figures are. That Chorley, with a population of just under 120,000 or so, has been given a new target of 569, and Preston, with a population of around 328,000, 250. If that makes sense to anybody, please explain it to me, and I'm sure someone will try. But based on what's been said previously, and again, with the fact that it's safeguarded land that we do not need to develop at this moment in time, I'm happy to support refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just to reiterate really what our planning officers have stated in the document. It is a piece of land that's coming forward a little bit too early again. I welcome the fact that the applicant has stated that they will include the 30% affordable housing, but I think it's a little bit too late, unfortunately. I think, again, an application like this, if it was for 34 sheltered accommodation bungalows designated for the elderly, I may be minded to support it because there is a need for that in nearly all the borough at the moment. But that isn't what developers are building, unfortunately. So on that basis, and like I said on the other application, Tinklers Lane, I would like to recommend the officers' recommendations for rejection.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? If not, I'll move to the vote. So it's for or against the officer recommendation for refusal. Councillor Beaver.
For, Chair.
Councillor Boardman.
For, Chair.
Councillor Dalton.
For, Chair.
Councillor France, Gordon France.
For, Chair.
Councillor G.
For, Chair.
Councillor Gray.
For, Chair.
Councillor Hargreaves.
For, Chair.
Councillor Hilton.
For.
Councillor Marwood.
For, Chair.
Councillor Walmsley.
For.
Councillor Whittam.
For, Chair.
Councillor Chris France.
For, Chair.
And myself for. Taz, do you want to confirm the outcome, please?
Yes, Chair. So, planning commission outline refused of land off Parr Lane for dwellings and associated, as you know.
Okay, thanks for that. Got a really bad connection, Taz, tonight. Moving swiftly on, item 3C, land at Carrington Road, Adlington, pages 101 to 144, with an update on your addendum. And the recommendation remains the same for refusal. Adele's going to present this item, and I have two registered speakers. the Town Councillor Kevin O'Donnell and the Ward Councillor, Councillor Peter Wilson. Kevin, Peter, can you hear? Ooh. Well, that was strange. Somebody's coming over sounding like Mickey Mouse. I don't know who it is. No. I can't hear. Adele, can you present the report and we'll try and sort the problem out?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in addition, again, to the comments that I made
On speaker, Chair.
That I made earlier, I just draw members' attention to the additional information detailed on the addendum, particularly the request from the agent that determination of the application is deferred to allow the agent time to address the points raised in the committee report. For the benefits of members, these comments are detailed in full together with the officer response. I'd also like to draw your attention to the objections that have been received from Councillors Dunn and Councillor Peter Wilson and County Councillor Kim Snape that are detailed in the addendum, together with the comments from the Environment Agency and the local highway authority. Thank you, Chair.
Kevin? I know. You're not coming through at all. I don't know how we're going to resolve this. Adele?
Is it possible?
Councillor Wilson, are you there? Adele?
Chair, can I suggest we maybe move on to the next item while we get these
try and sort that. Yeah.
out?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. Item D is land at Tinklers Lane, Eccleston, page 145 to 186, with an update on your addendum. And the recommendation is for refusal. Adele's going to present the item. I have two registered speakers, an objector, Gillian Sharples, and Alan Whittaker, whose comments we've already noted. He says they're the same as before. Gillian, can you speak and hear us?
I can, thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Adele, can you present that report?
Thank you, Chair. Just to make members aware that this application is subject to an appeal against non-determination, so it's not open to the local planning authority to actually make a decision. Rather, members are invited to indicate what their decision would have been, as I set out earlier. Just to draw your attention to the comments that are made on the addendum in respect of the Environment Agency. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Gillian, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, firstly, I would like to say that I'm very pleased with the officer's recommendations, and I thank them for all the hard work on this application and the other ones that have been brought forward this evening. I lived in Eccleston for many years, and in that time additional housing was indeed provided. However, this application, which proposes to build 80 houses on safeguarded land, is absolutely not required at this time, nor has the developer given any clear reason why this development is needed. The local healthcare services, infrastructure and school places will be severely detrimented. Additional traffic on Doctors Lane and Tinklers Lane will result in a further deterioration of the roads, more pollution, and potentially causing traffic to become gridlocked outside Eccleston Primary School, which is already extremely busy at peak times. It's also well documented through various studies that living close to green and more natural surroundings have an increased benefit to our own mental health and well-being. Eccleston is in danger of not only having its village character chipped away, but completely destroyed, in similar vein to areas such as Exton. There is no real need for this development, and I therefore ask that the committee refuse this application in accordance with the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Whittaker's comments were exactly the same as before, so that is there. So I now move over to members and ask for their comments, any questions. And could you raise your hand on Teams, please? I've got Councillor Morwood, Councillor Boardman.
We're working well tonight. What a team.
You're like a double act.
Tag team.
I'll just begin by saying that it's disappointing the applicant has decided to appeal against non-determination. I mean, officers did request an extension, and it wouldn't have been for much longer than when it should have, perhaps, as they think it should have been determined. And other applicants did allow us that at that time to put the reports together. It was a busy time. It was COVID time and so on. But however, they've made the decision, and we move on, and we will give them an idea of what we would have said had it come in time as they see it. The safeguarding issue is the same as before. In fact, all of the reasons for refusals as laid down in the report are there, and we've argued through these in a similar vein for the first couple of applications. So these are very similar. So I am minded, I think is the phrase, to refuse this application in line as being recommended by officers. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm not going to repeat everything I said before on the other Tinklers Lane site, but all the points are still relative to this site. For those of you who don't know this site, this is on the western side of Eccleston. It's probably the last green space buffer before you hit the green belt. It's a site. It is in the designated settlement area. However, as we've said before, it is a piece of safeguarded land. So something that we need to retain for potential future development if the need ever arises. I, like other councillors, don't believe there is a need there for Eccleston at the moment. An extra 80 houses would have a huge detrimental effect on the Doctors Lane road access into the village itself. The Doctors Lane crossroads is already completely swamped in the mornings between 8:30 and 9:30. Access to the school is virtually impossible. You've got to park a significant way down the road. It's never safe parking outside a school or even away from the school. I really don't think it's suitable in this location. What I'm really disappointed about is that this is a site opposite the existing cricket ground. The cricket ground was moved around about 20 years ago, and Cricketers Green sprung up, which is an estate of houses. How long will it be before Eccleston Cricket Field is actually within the village of Maudsley if we bump it a bit further down the fields? So, with a bit of tongue-in-cheek, I think I'll move to refuse the application and support the officer's recommendation.
Okay. Anybody else wish to make any comments?
I'll second that, please.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have a proposal and a second. Anyone else wish to speak? No. Right. We will go through everybody and see. Councillor Beaver, for or against? We are minded to refuse the application. Councillor Boardman.
For, Chair.
Councillor Dalton.
For, Chair.
Councillor Gordon France.
For.
Councillor G.
For, Chair.
Councillor Gray.
For, Chair.
Councillor Hargreaves.
For, Chair.
Councillor Hilton.
For.
Councillor Morwood.
For.
Councillor Walmsley.
For.
Councillor Whittam.
For.
Councillor Chris France.
For.
And myself for. Taz, do you want to confirm the outcome, please?
Yes, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So we have confirmed that had they had the opportunity to determine this application, they would have been minded to refuse the application for the reasons outlined in the actual report. And this is in respect of 80 dwellings, including 30% affordable housing associated with infrastructure, with all matters reserved at land at Tinklers Echo School.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boardman, you've got your hand up.
Chair,
We're
getting a lot of we're getting a lot of noises from the background on these.
I know.
Chair,
There's nothing I can do about it because people do not mute their microphones. Always. So there is not a lot I can do about that. Can we go back to item 3C? Because I think Councillor Wilson is now on the call. Councillor Wilson, are you there?
I am indeed, Chair.
And I'll go and see if I can. Kevin, are you there? Kevin O'Donnell?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Would you like to make your representations very quickly while we can hear you?
Certainly will. Thank you. Speaking in relation to the land at Carrington Road, Adlington, probably saying a lot of what's been said before, but I'd like to give a personal perspective from a resident. We welcome new residents in Adlington, and I accept we need new housing to meet with national development. But with this particular development, similar to others, I suspect the issue is infrastructure. Firstly, road access down Park Road over the canal is terrible now. It's effectively a one-way street. It will not support yet more cars going in and out. It's congested and there's regular queues going each way. And it's trouble enough with cars, but with any construction vehicles and the access through Sandy Lane to Carrington Road is just totally unsuitable to what's proposed. Secondly, on infrastructure, schools, Lancashire County Council's own study 5 years ago identified a shortfall of 60 primary places in Adlington. And since then, housing has been built, and Lancashire County Council's view is that children from Adlington can go to schools in Carr Lane in Chorley, which is just not on. Transport, the bus services, as most of you probably know, are totally irrelevant, totally useless to anyone in Adlington. And what it'll lead to would be just adding to more commuters in the area, clogging up existing local roads. New developments need to be properly planned, not piecemeal affairs. Two other minor points. The developers said there was a bank nearby, which there isn't. That closed some time ago. And there is a cash point a few hundred metres away, but that charges you £1.50 for every withdrawal. So those are a few local points to give a local flavour, but the key is infrastructure for this particular development. And 25 houses is a speculative proposal by a developer and just not suited to the area without proper infrastructure support. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm glad we managed to get you in the end. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I will not repeat what Kevin's just outlined and the very good reasons why he believes the application should be opposed and the difficulties that it would create should it be approved. As members will be aware, this area is safeguarded land, and that is for a purpose that's not to be included in the plan as it stands at the moment, but for potential future developments. And given that we've had a recent decision by a planning inspector which supports the fact that we have enough supply of land, I do not see any reason why we need to go outside of our current plan and bring this site forward. There is no justification for doing so. And as Kevin just said, only a justification in the future would only be there if the relevant infrastructure was put in place in order to support the additional pressures on schools, doctors, roads, etc. Those are arguments members are well aware of. So on the basis that this is not necessary or needed at this stage, I would urge members to oppose this application, and for the very practical reasons just outlined by the previous speaker, that the infrastructure is not there to match it. And again, when done properly at the right time with the appropriate infrastructure, you would look again, but currently that does not exist, and therefore I would urge members to oppose this application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll invite members for any comments, questions. Raise your hand virtually. So it's over to you, members. Councillor Walmsley.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm not going to say too much on this. I think the safeguarded argument has been discussed quite a number of times today, and that obviously is very pertinent to this particular application again. I think something that was also in there, part of this site is actually within the green belt, so it makes it doubly a reason why not to build at this moment in time. It's there for future if needed. I do echo the points made regarding amenity within Adlington, because I'm a resident of Adlington myself. I know that area very well down by Carrington, and it isn't an area that is blessed with the best amenities, roads, the schools and infrastructure is quite a long way away from there in terms of getting the best out of it. So again, another reason why I don't think this is right at this moment in time anyway. So I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation on this one, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morwood.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to talk about the green belt, so that's Councillor Walmsley has already said. That's in addition to the safeguarding issue, which we've obviously well rehearsed. I think that was is this one of the applications where they were calling for a deferment, where they thought we weren't following procedures and so forth. But deferring would not change our opinion on what we've already said about safeguarding land. So I'm happy to second the officer's recommendations.
Okay. Anybody else wish to make? Thank you. Anybody else wish to make any comments? If not, I'll move to the vote. Don't see any more hands coming up. Councillor Walmsley, your hand's still up. I'll go through with the members list. Councillor Beaver, for or against refusal?
For, Chair.
Councillor Boardman.
For, Chair.
Councillor Dalton.
For, Chair.
Councillor France.
For.
Councillor G.
For, Chair.
Councillor Gray.
For, Chair.
Councillor Hargreaves.
For, Chair.
Councillor Hilton.
For.
Councillor Morwood.
Helps if you unmute. For.
I heard you though.
Yes, but no one else did.
Councillor Whittam.
For, Chair.
Councillor Chris Franz.
For, Chair.
And myself for. Taz, do you want to confirm the outcome, please?
Yes, Chair. So the members have voted to refuse our land permission in respect of development of up to 25 dwellings and associated infrastructure at land at Carrington Road, Adlington. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Item E, because we've already done D, item E, land north of Town Lane, Whitley Woods, pages 187 to 274, with an update on your addendum, although the recommendation for refusal remains the same. Adele's going to present this item, and I have registered speakers. Objectors, Trevor Howarth, Parish Councillor Tina Newall, and Ward Councillors John Walker and Mark Clifford. Trevor, Tina, John, Mark, can you all hear and speak?
Yes, Chair. Trevor Howard.
Yes, Chair.
Yes,
I think everybody said yes then.
Yes, Chair.
Adele, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In addition to the comments that I made at the beginning, I would just reiterate that this application is not open for the local planning authority to determine, given that we have an appeal against non-determination. Again, rather, the members are invited to set out what their decision would have been. I'd just like to point out that on the addendum there are objections from Councillors Gabbett and 2 parish councillors, together with objections from Whitley Woods Residents Association and Whitley Woods Flood Action Group, and these are set out in full. Also on the addendum, the comments of the Environment Agency are detailed, and I would just draw your attention particularly to the second addendum, which sets out rather belatedly the comments that I've only received this afternoon from Lancashire County Council in their capacity as the local highway authority, and just to note that a third reason for refusal is recommended on that in relation to highway safety issues. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Trevor, would you like to speak now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Whitley Woods is a village with rural infrastructure. The definition of a village is a group of houses and associated buildings, larger than a hamlet and smaller than a town, situated in a rural area. Redrow is a house builder and a FTSE 250 listed company. On the 30th of June, it announced to the market that it was pulling out of London as the coronavirus pandemic generates a higher demand for larger homes and gardens that are cheaper outside the UK capital. The company stated the cost of scaling back its operation in London would hit its full year profits. Redrow said there was a desire for more inside and outside space, people wanting to live closer to green spaces and having better home workspace. The chief executive, John Toot, accepted that the sales were underpinned by the government's Help to Buy scheme. It's little wonder he's urged the government to extend this scheme, which is due to end, as it accounted for a third of Redrow sales last year. On the 16th of September, it's reported Redrow's profits sank 66% in the last financial year. The house builder took a £35 million hit pulling out of London, and the full year profits fell 66% while revenue fell 37%. Therefore, Redrow themselves have publicly stated they've been impacted by coronavirus. However, when it comes to this application, the council's request for an extension of time to determine the application was refused. Instead, without a determination, Redrow, fully alive to the strong opposition, sought to gain an advantage in the process by appealing the non-determination on the 1st of April. If this matter were to be judicially reviewed, I am confident that a court would find that the refusal by Redrow for the extension of time was wensely unreasonable, especially in circumstances in which the applicant themselves have publicly stated they've been affected by coronavirus. Redrow's own research refers to people wanting to live close to green spaces. Where will those green spaces be in Whitley Woods? Councillor Clifford noted that the environmental study submitted by the developer is woefully inadequate and the survey was conducted at the wrong time of year. The highways and traffic, the applicant has failed to establish it is possible to deliver safe access for all users either during construction or after occupation. Councillor Walker noted Redrow's traffic management survey was carried out in November during lockdown. It does not reflect normal traffic movements. Importantly, and one could argue, not an oversight, no survey was carried out around the time at the end of the school day. The Wildlife Trust, in their objections, there is currently insufficient information for the council to determine this application. Flooding, the proposed site impinges on a known level 3 flood risk area. The application is lacking in detail and has significant omissions. It's impossible to scrutinise to a level that confirms feasibility. The report from the WRA, there are no photos of the site, which is a normal requirement to demonstrate that consultants have actually visited the site. Overall, the FRA is very brief for the size of the development. Those are just a couple of extracts from the reports, which all the reports must be read in full. One must ask the question, what is Redrow's urgency to force this application through when many of the fundamental reports that are required are deficient? One would have expected that if this was a serious application, Redrow would have welcomed the additional time to complete its reports and robustly present its application. Instead, to appease shareholders, this FTSE 250 company seeks to use the coronavirus pandemic in Whitley Woods to its advantage and attempting to railroad this application through to the Planning Inspectorate, avoiding public consultation, avoiding the submission of accurate and highly relevant traffic and flooding reports, and most of all, avoiding the determination of Chorley Council. This application is simply about profit over common sense and people's lives.
Thank you. Who have I got next? Tina, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. Whitley Woods Parish Council believe this application and the manner and timing of its presentation and for a transparent planning process. Despite the resources available to this developer, they must not be allowed to use the perceived loophole in housing numbers to exploit Whittle's green spaces with a damaging development. It is distasteful that ratepayers' money may need to be spent opposing a speculative application, especially in the current economic circumstances. It is pleasing to learn just this afternoon that LCC Highways have objected on the critical issue of safe access and in confirmation of the professional traffic assessment commissioned by the Parish Council. Please allow me to quote from this independent report. I quote, "It is considered that the safety impacts for non-car modes are unacceptable and the residual impacts at specific locations would be severe in nature," unquote. Moving on to flooding, it is not a theoretical risk. It already happens and the number of alerts is increasing. The calculations are of no use or comfort to households when their homes are submerged. Common sense should prevail. For the record, we believe the developer's ecology report is inadequate, and that has not been scrutinised to an acceptable level by the Greater Manchester Ecology Unit. We welcome the officer's recommendation to refuse and ask the Planning Committee to send a clear signal to that this development would be inappropriate for a range of reasons, including the safeguarded land issue, the lack of safe access for all users. And finally, Whitley Woods Parish Council now call on Redrow PLC to advise that it intends to withdraw this application forthwith. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker. You're muted, John.
I thought I was.
There you go. You've muted yourself again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Can I start by supporting the comments made by Councillor Morwood and Councillor Boardman earlier in the evening? They covered what I was going to say, basically, about this application. And I don't propose to go into a lot of detail on the recommendation. After many years as a councillor, I've spoken at many planning meetings against planning applications in Whitley Woods, and I have never seen as many written applications to object to the proposals. 300, which is a great result from the residents of Whittle, and just shows what they feel about this application from Redrow. I'd written various things out tonight, but people have spoken about these things before. Can I also thank the Residents Association, Parish Council and the Action Group for their work. I have gone into much detail. They have gone into great detail, and more than I could personally do, and thank them for their dedication to compile all the information to bring a coherent management result to show that they object to this application. My final comments are basically about the local amenities in the area. We are having a doctor's surgery built, which will help people who live in the village. We've got 2 schools in the area, but unfortunately, they are always full. St Chad's can only take 20 new pupils every year. Whittle School, where I'm chairman of governors, we can take 35. This year for Whittle School, we've had 98 families visiting the school, and how many are put in the application, but we can only take 35 children, and this coming September. So you can see the difficulty is if you had 250 houses with children, families would have to drive out of the area to go to the various schools in Chorley, Brindle, Horton and Withnell. So the thought of having 250 houses built is totally unacceptable. Over the years, Chorley Council has approved many new housing developments in Whitley Woods, and residents now feel that this new application is totally unacceptable to be sustainable in the village. And I just hope that the Planning Committee will support the officers and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Chair. As Ward Councillor for Clayton and Whittle and champion of environment and green space, I object in the strongest possible terms to this outline planning permission. The cumulative effect of this application, if allowed, will have a devastating effect on local nature and the surrounding environment, the existing infrastructure of Whitley Woods and the health and well-being of our residents. These houses are not needed or wanted, and this application, I feel, is a highly speculative attempt by the developer to avoid public scrutiny during a national health crisis. I feel so strongly that I'd actually call it a scandalous attempt. To start with, the environmental study submitted by the developer is woefully inadequate, and the survey was conducted at the wrong time of year. Many important species have not been recorded due to this. The building of what is in effect another village on these green fields will dramatically alter how wildlife live and transit the area, bringing conflict with vehicles on the M61 motorway running parallel. Numerous bird and bat strikes on the M61 will result due to the pinch point on the eastern fringes of the proposed development due to the strangling of an important wildlife corridor. These existing green fields are a natural shelter belt to Whitley Woods from the M61 motorway, and they clean the air of pollutants emanating from vehicles travelling at high speed. By removing this shelter belt, more residents of Whitley Woods will now be subject to an increase of dangerous NOx and PM 2.5 particulates if allowed to go ahead. The existing road network, including Town Lane, is not suitable for any increase in vehicular traffic. None of the routes exiting Town Lane are what could be deemed as safe. And with the road being semi-rural, conflicts with horses and pedestrians are highly likely. Only a few months ago, I had new signage on Town Lane installed by Lancashire County Council, making motorists aware of horse riding taking place in the area. In fact, there are stables already on Town Lane, underlying the semi-rural character of the area. The loss of this beautiful semi-rural nature by increased volumes of traffic would in fact be a loss of public amenity and therefore constitutes another reason to refuse these plans, and I am glad Lancashire County Council has agreed. Chorley Council have declared a climate and nature emergency, and these plans go against our commitment to become carbon neutral by 2030. Stagecoach, the bus operator, has already said that this application on Town Lane is a bad example of developers not thinking about sustainable public transport in a presentation made to members of an overview and scrutiny task group looking at sustainable public transport. The topography of the surrounding area and walking distance to a primary route being reasons why house building should not take place here. Climate change is happening, and quickly this will only bring more serious flooding events to Whitley Woods. The siting of a housing development on green fields that are a natural soakaway will devastate existing properties at Waterhouse Green. Water management on the site will be severely challenged, and even with holding ponds being installed, more flooding and pollution will result in future as water rushes into the River Lostock from this estate. There will also be a loss of riparian natural habitats downstream of this development and throughout Kewarden Valley Park. Finally, the strain on existing infrastructure should not be underestimated. There is a lack of school provision, as Councillor Walker has said, for the children in our area. There's a lack of shops in the vicinity, dentistry, entertainment. New residents would have to use their cars when accessing these services further increasing pollution. Chorley Council has already delivered its fair share of housing, as we've heard tonight. And the government and developers need to understand this fact and accept it. Residents of Whitley Woods, we all agree that enough is enough. These plans do not represent sustainable development and should therefore be refused outright, and I hope members of the committee agree with me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Over to you, members. Any comments, questions? Use the raise hand function, please. Oh, got a few people. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Walmsley, Councillor Hargreaves, Councillor Gordon-France, Councillor Morwood.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep my comments brief, and obviously I note that this is a minded to application. Again, I think in terms of the safeguarded land, this has been on in each of the applications. This is a huge application for 250 houses as well. So that has a major impact in terms of safeguarded for 250 houses. I think the points made in paragraph 6.1, 6.2 of the report, which give the reasons for refusal or minded to refusal, I think are pretty strong. And the fact that highways have also come in now and refused, and I think use the word severe. And I think anyone who's been on the planning committee over the years will know that that's not something LCC highways do too often and too lightly. So for them to come in with that, for that also means there must be significant reasons why this application should be refused. It's too early, it's too big, it's not needed at this moment in time. It does sort of smack of opportunism, if we're being frank. So I think if this application was before us to determine, I would be minded to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased that Lancashire County Council did deliver the report this afternoon, because it was a bit worrying it wasn't coming. But I'm also very pleased with their response. I do live in the area, and I have to say it's overdeveloped, over intensification of the village. I don't think the 250 houses, 250 houses are needed at all. The infrastructure can't take it, and the roads certainly can't take it. In parts of the road on Town Lane, there's no footpath. It's extremely narrow. It's very difficult to navigate. It's a blind bend. Dark Lane is a run through from the edge of Town Lane, right the way through to the motorway. That's very, very busy. Now, I would hate to see what it would be like if we actually built those 250 houses. I think it is speculative and opportunism by Redrow, and I would be minded to refuse this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon-France.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of Town Lane actually runs through my ward, and obviously I'm going to support Councillor Hargreaves, but going along Town Lane towards St Chad's School, which Councillor Walker, Councillor Clifford have mentioned, and Withnell, you've got a canal bridge that will only take one car. It's blind coming up. You can't see what's coming down the other way. A lot of sections of Town Lane don't have a footpath. It's just a recipe for disaster. And as Councillor Hargreaves has said, there would be, in some cases, if people were trying to avoid Hartwood Hall, there would be cases of people turning down Dark Lane to use it as a rat run. Again, parts of Dark Lane at any speed, it is very difficult to get two cars by each other without going right over. And I don't think two vans, and certainly a truck and a van or a truck and a car, could not pass down there. So I'm pleased to see that in the addendum, Lancashire County Council Highways have at least come back. And as Councillor Walmsley said, that is not something that happens very often.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Morwood, then Councillor Boardman. Councillor Morwood.
No, I'll be very quick because it's been seconded and so forth. But I just want to again mention my disappointment that the applicant decided to appeal this against for non-determination. And the first speaker spoke very well on this matter. And the second speaker on the various environmental effects in great detail, and I doubt I could even come close to adding anything that the speaker made on that. But I just felt I had to add my great thanks to Lancashire County Council Highways. As been pointed out, I've been on this committee 6 years, and I think this is only the second time that Highways have actually raised an objection to something. So we should take note, and I'm glad they did so. So I'll leave it at that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate what the other councillors have said, I think in the in my time on the planning committee since 2015, I don't think I've seen a worse location for a site of 250 houses. I do know the lane really well. I do cycle down there quite a bit, actually. I would be minded to request that the planning inspector, when he does come up, comes up on the train and sees how long it takes for him to get to Chorley train station to Town Lane, and especially carrying a pair of wellies, which you'll need to walk across the site, might be quite useful. So yeah, I fully endorse what the planning officer's recommendation says tonight.
Okay, thank you. I think that's everybody. Councillor Walmsley, is that an old hand? Yes,
It is. Sorry, Chair, I keep forgetting to take it down.
I know, it's all right. It's your age. We understand. If that's everybody that's spoken, then I'll go through the list. We will be minded to refuse the application for or against the officer recommendation. Councillor Beaver?
For, Chair.
Councillor Boardman?
For, Chair.
Councillor Dalton?
For, Chair.
Councillor France?
For.
Gordon France. Councillor G?
For, Chair.
Councillor Gray?
For, Chair.
Councillor Hargreaves?
For, Chair.
Councillor Hill?
For.
Councillor Morwood?
For.
Councillor Walmsley?
For.
Councillor Whittam?
For.
Councillor Chris France?
For.
And myself for. Taz, do you want to confirm?
Yes, Chair. So members have indicated that if they were to determine the application, they would have be minded to refuse that application in respect of the construction of up to 250 dwellings and associated infrastructure, with all matters reserved aside from the access from Town Lane at land north of Town Lane, Whitley Woods. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Item F is land adjacent Blainsker Hall, Blainsker Lane, Coppell, pages 275 to 316. With an update on your addendum, although the recommendation for refusal remains the same. I have registered speakers. I have an objector, Ian Winstanley, Parish Councillor Steve Holgate, and the Ward Councillor, Councillor Berry. Ian, Steve, Julia, can you all hear and speak?
I can.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, thank you. Adele, do you want to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just really to draw members' attention to the comments on the addendum that have been received from the Environment Agency, and again in particular from the Local Highway Authority. Members will note that the consultation response received from Lancashire County Council Highways again raises an objection to the proposed development, and therefore it is recommended that a further reason for refusal is added as detailed on your addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Adele. Ian, do you want to speak now, please?
I will,
Can you start the timer?
Thank you for giving this opportunity. A lot has been said this evening regarding safeguarded land and Greenbelt, two of which were my strong objections. The other objections that I have listed down here is obviously if this should be granted, current wildlife will be affected on a daily basis. I see obviously birds of prey and other live creatures. And during heavy downpours, I've witnessed manhole covers being lifted on Grange Drive. Further development will undoubtedly bring more unwanted flooding in this area and surrounding areas. Although I have not witnessed serious incidents or accidents, Grange Drive is already a hazardous entrance, and more housing will only increase the intensity of this risk. Having lived in this village all my life, I've witnessed lots of new houses and developments in Coppell and nearby surrounding areas. Green space is precious and there is less of it. In my opinion, there is more appropriate brown sites available within the areas, and for these reasons I strongly object to this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Holgate, please. Oh dear.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As has been stated on all the different applications that's been put before you this evening, there are certain issues to do with the safeguarded land,
that it's not appropriate to develop it at this time, and that it will simply put more pressure on our struggling greenbelt. But I'd like to take a different tack on this particular occasion, because the parish council have asked me to speak up on their behalf, not least because they are in the process of developing a neighbourhood plan, and a neighbourhood plan is there to try and wrestle a little bit more control over what happens in the village and how the village is developed. And we've got to remember that infrastructure support for infrastructure is very difficult in an expanding village, and to simply bring forward applications such as this on a speculative manner is less than helpful. We have a planning committee, we have a planning policy national guidelines, we have planning policy local guidelines, we have a planning department and a planning committee. The common theme throughout that is planning, and we cannot plan when speculators are allowed to simply come through willy-nilly, looking to maximise the profits with little to no regard for the community that they're appearing in. The land at the back of Manor Road is, in my view, very environmentally precious, and there is little to no information about what it holds. So the ecology of it is unknown, and that needs to be looked at significantly as well. And I think that what we need to do is send this back and say, no, now is not the time. And furthermore, there are many good reasons to have serious concern. As has been said before, you know, it's not very often that Lancashire County Council and the Environment Agency come up with any concerns. Yet on this occasion, on this particular site, that is the case, and we need to make sure that we're cognizant of that, and so too at the village know that we are fighting on their behalf to make sure that, you know, inappropriate and untimely developments are not allowed to take place. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Berry.
Thank you. As a Chisnall ward representative, I'm here to speak against this insensitive, premature and flawed application. Coppell residents take their responsibilities seriously as custodians of their village and are working to form a neighbourhood plan in order to work more closely with Chorley Council and the emerging local plan. The applicant submitting a premature application on safeguarded land has disregarded and disrespected the aspirations of local people to shape future planning in their own area. I would also like to put on record the distress caused by the insensitive and limited consultation by the applicant during a pandemic at a time when residents couldn't even talk face to face with their family and neighbours or their council representatives on this matter. Local residents, however, have submitted many concerns which thankfully have been recognised largely by Chorley Council and is reflected in the consultee responses. Their concerns featured threat to the local environment, road and safety issues, high school place shortages, flooding concerns, loss of amenity and the unexplored potential of the heritage area related to Blainscow Hall. I would like to briefly refer members to objections from Coppell and Charnock Richard Parish Councils and refer planning members also to the Lancashire County Council report, which does not support the proposal as the applicant has not provided sufficient evidence that the development has addressed the impact on highway safety, in particular traffic generation and road safety analysis are missing from the application, and particular concerns are expressed about the Grange Drive junction. For years, residents have been raising concerns about the safety of the junction, which remain unresolved by Lancashire County Council. I refer also planning members to the Greater Manchester Ecology report, who advise that further ecology studies need to take place. These responses I've highlighted are significant, and it demonstrates that this application is not only premature but unprepared. The principled planning is not proven with these concerns, and and as they clearly spelt out in Chorley Council's reason for refusal. And I commend the early report in this meeting regarding housing supply and the reasons to retain our safeguarding land. Our green belt is under threat. Our safeguard land is under threat. Please support the council's recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Okay. Adele, you want to come in there?
Yes, Chair, it's just a matter of correction really before members debate the item, just to make reference to the fact that the number quoted on the addendum and on your papers is incorrect. The actual application number is 20/01399/outmatch. Thank you, Chair, just as a matter of record. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't really want to sound like a stuck record with what's been said here this evening. I'll start with the positives. I'm quite pleased to see that the developer is offering 30% affordable homes, and that's about as far as I can go with that. Obviously, LCC have raised highways concerns, which I do share. I live in Coppell and I drive past this area every day. I'm really concerned to see that on the Grange Drive roundabout, there have been 9 injury accidents and 3 of them have been considered to be severe. So I welcome LCC's report to state that they have concerns as it is at the moment. Obviously, there's concerns over Great Crested Newts, and I think we need to be sure that they're not present or that appropriate actions have been taken any further. The people of Coppell deserve better than this, and the people of Chorley overall deserve better than these applications. We deserve a planning process that we can trust, a process that takes into account the environment, the needs of the area and the needs of the residents. We also need one that respects the local plan, as that's what the planning process is based upon. And unfortunately, these applications for safeguarded land don't seem to do so. I'm quite confident in the officer's assessment of the fact that we have got housing for the next 5 years and therefore safeguarded land should not be come forward. I think the developer in submitting this plan has shown contempt for the above that I previously mentioned, and what's the point of having a planning process and a local plan if it's to be ignored? Overall, these developments, the developers are like vultures circling, waiting to pounce on an opportunity to make easy money whilst disregarding the local areas and residents. This particular development is not needed. I don't believe that there is a significant housing crisis in Chorley. This development is not wanted. This development is not appropriate. I don't believe that there's enough weight in the argument to allow development on safeguarded land. Obviously concerns with highway safety and concerns with ecology. So therefore, I would like to propose officer recommendations for refusal set out in the report and the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from anybody? Councillor Marwood.
Thank you, Chair. The arguments are well rehearsed, so I'm happy to second that recommendation that we support the officer's recommendation for refusal based on 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments? If not, I'll move to the vote. So it's all those in favour or against the officer recommendation for refusal. I'll go through everybody. Councillor Beaver.
For, Chair.
Councillor Boardman.
For, Chair.
Councillor Dalton.
For, Chair.
Councillor Gordon-Franz.
For.
Councillor G.
For, Chair.
Councillor Gray.
For, Chair.
Councillor Hargreaves.
For, Chair.
Councillor Hilton.
For.
Councillor Morwood.
For.
Councillor Walmsley.
For.
Councillor Whittam.
For, Chair.
Councillor Chris Franz.
For.
And myself, for. Taz, do you want to confirm the outcome, please?
Yes, Chair, thank you. So the committee has decided to refuse outline planning permission for the erection of up to 123 dwellings with POS, structural planting and landscaping and vehicular access points from Grange Drive in respect of land adjacent to Blainscough Lane, Coppell. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 4, any urgent business? I haven't any. That's the end of the business tonight's meeting. Thanks to everybody, and I declare the meeting closed. And can you stop the recording, please, ICT?
Thank you,
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Good night.